Good morning, everybody. This is an atypical morning for those of you who are watching elsewhere. We had a little snow divert our original plans, so we decided since we're already up our crazy hill and we're here, we're going to go ahead and teach the lesson for those of you who want to watch it online or listen to it later. Although I will confess, I think for both Heather and I, when we released ourselves from this lesson and realized we were going to be back early from church, we stopped for donuts and coffee. So I'm like 3 donuts deep and a coffee. So I may
Sugar jitters have hit.
may go real fast. So maybe some of your preference, maybe not. We also have our kids in the room, which is fantastic. So we'll try not to name any names in our stories or have to shout anybody down. But, hopefully everybody will stay awake anyway. Well, with that, let's dive in. So last week, we talked a lot about just assessing ourselves. So we started with kind of the case for this class and for thinking collectively about our parenting. And we talked a lot about intentionality. There's a lot of things to emphasize that we could talk about as we go through a class about parenting together. But one of the overarching things we want to call us collectively to is just being intentional and thinking about our parenting. We hit over 3 key areas to kind of think about and to emphasize for ourselves. One is that God has authority in our life as parents. 2, that God disciplines those that he loves. And 3, we find our identity in Christ. And as we talk through assessing ourselves, it's an encouragement to think about where we are on our parenting journey, where we need to improve or correct, but also looking at our kids and looking at the things that they're struggling with and saying, okay, do we need to kind of adjust our emphasis and talk through more or different things with them? And that's not a one-time thing where you just start off and you're like, okay, I'm going to look in and see how I'm doing, and then that's it. No, it's a continual assessment process, thinking about our own hearts, thinking about those of our kids.
And a continual conversation with your spouse. Right?
Yes.
This is a periodic game planning situation.
Absolutely. And I think that we had some of those conversations this week. There were some things happening in our house that we realized, okay, Heather and I, we need to chat about this, and we needed to think of maybe some different ways to handle some things.
Because it changes as our kids age and as we enter different seasons.
And the encouragement here is to not be zombie parents, to not just let the craziness of life and the pressures of doing everything, raising kids, just call us to be to a place where we're just going through the motions and not paying attention and aiming where we're going. As we open up, I want to call us to Psalm 127, verses 3 through 5, and I'm just going to read this one to us. It's familiar to most of you, I'm sure. Psalm 127:3 says, "Behold, children are a heritage from the Lord, the fruit of the womb, a reward. Like arrows in the hand of a warrior are the children of one's youth. Blessed is the man who fills his quiver with them." I love this analogy for a lot of reasons, and admittedly, I might take it a little too far, but I'll confess, I really enjoy archery, and I like it in kind of all facets, but I'll say that not just like the fancy crossbows and compound bows, but the traditional, like just a piece of wood and a string and an arrow. I just enjoy it. I've spent some time the past few years coaching middle schoolers on it. And so one of the reasons I love this analogy is because it just fits so well with the challenges of parenting. If you've never shot a bow before, it is really simple on one hand. On the other hand, it requires doing the exact same thing perfectly over and over and over again, paying attention to every single little detail as you do. So what happens with a bow is when you grab one hand with the bow and then you put your fingers on the string on the other hand, as you pull that string back on a traditional regular old bow, the more you pull back and set to fire the arrow, the greater the pressure you're under. the harder it is to pull. And you have to hold under that pressure. And under the pressure, you have to do everything right. You have to hold your form right. You have to hold your aim, find your target, aim at it under the maximum pressure, and then let that arrow go and let it fly. And once you let it fly, there's no touching it afterwards, right? Like it goes where you've sent it. And it's not a perfect analogy to parenting, but the truth is that when the world comes at us, we're under maximum pressure. And it's under that maximum pressure and the craziness of life and everything that's going on that we still must take the time to aim our arrows. And it was funny in middle school, it was a riot because whenever you teach a kid to shoot archery, the same thing happens every time. Like they pull back that string and their focus and their energy is on the pressure and the effort to get the string back. And they just let the arrow fly and it goes where it may because all their energy and focus is on, can I be strong enough to handle this pressure? And they don't think about where the arrow's going. And so I want to encourage us as we talk through the lesson today, as we continue on in our parenting, you're going to be under a lot of pressure. Don't focus on the energy and the effort of the pressure that's laid on you as a parent. In that moment, think about your aim. Think about where you want to let that arrow fly. And it's not a perfect analogy. Obviously, we hope that there's no point that we just let them sail off while we're still on this earth and we're not having any influence on their life. But we have maximum time to make those changes in these little years that we have them in the house with us day in and day out.
Well, I think if we carry the analogy a little further, it is our job to be faithful with the aiming or the drawing of the bow. It's our job to be faithful and entrust our kids to the Lord, but we don't have control over what happens after we let them fly. There's a trusting in that.
Absolutely. And in the book, Shepherding a Child's Heart, they kind of drew a graph out in the book and talked about authority and our authority as parents over our children and how it changes over the course of their life as they age. And basically, we start as parents in their life with maximum authority, right? Like when they're an infant, every decision is our decision for them, right? When they eat, when they sleep, caring for them in every little measure. And over time, that maximum authority in their life, it begins to drop, right? They make more and more decisions on their own until they reach a point where they start moving out of our house where our authority over their decisions and over their life has diminished. What else happens is on the other hand of it, if we start with our authority up high and that it is waning over time, we hope that the way that we interact with them is over influence in their decisions and the respect that they've garnered of us and how much they choose to listen to us. And that influence portion of our communication with them is increasing as they age. And, there'll be some point in their life where the decision is theirs over whether we as parents have any influence in what they do, right? Mm-hmm. Like once they're out of the home, they're living on their own, it's their decision what that relationship is or isn't. And so
they're no longer under our authority in
the
same way.
So as we start and we move this morning, we're going to be talking about authority in the home. And I think it's worth thinking about the long term of where we want our relationship with our kids to be, not just as they're, 1 to 5 years old or in middle school or in high school, but as they transition into adulthood. What is the parent that we want to be? What is the respect that we want to garner in their lives? And, it's funny. I say sitcoms, but I think I'm probably stuck in like the 90s and early 2000 ones. That's about as up to date as I am.
Sitcoms are not a thing anymore.
Yeah, but you can almost look at like the parenting types on some of those shows. And I would encourage dads to think, what is the type of parent that you want to be seen as? Like, I think of like, do you want to be the Ray Romano who's dad's just kind of the big dummy, Like, he wants to have authority. He likes to talk like he does, but everybody knows he doesn't know what's going on. He's good for a laugh every now and then, but he's just a blubbering fool. He doesn't do anything in the house. Like, is that the dad you want to be? Kind of the absentee one.
Where mom and the kids kind of poke fun at him together
Yeah.
against him.
It's, dad's the butt of the jokes.
Yeah.
Is it the domineering dad? Are you going to wind up being the domineering dad, the one that exercises authority in the home by just yelling and fear? And as your kids age, they know, well, dad already has his formed opinion on every single thing in life. So if you come to him with anything, he's just going to tell you, like, that's dumb. This is how it's supposed to be, that there's no listening. Do you want to be the good buddy dad, the dad that's just there for a good time? I always can have fun with dad. We go play. But if I need anything serious, I can't go to him. He's just the goofy dad. Or do you want to grow up to be the godly, respected dad? Not the one that gains respect by just yelling and laying down the law, but the one that quietly commands it because of the way that you've lived with authority in your home, and you've marked your relationship with your kids and your spouse with love and looking out for their best interest in the decisions that you make. Like, where do you want to be? Do you want to be the dad that when they're 17 or 25 or 35 and they're going through the hardest thing in their life, that they know that you will listen to what's going on and have words of wisdom for them? And the same for the moms. Like, and in some ways, even more so for moms in setting the tone of the home and how you want to be, and thinking about how you want to be viewed as your kids move on into adulthood. Do you want to be the amazing planner mom? You can plan a party, you can plan a Thanksgiving meal, you can coordinate anything, but busyness is your constant tone to the level that you don't have time for tough conversations, for enjoyment, for the relationship with your people. Do you want to be the all-love best friend mom who are like, you're as much in the drama, you're more in the drama than you are able to pull yourself out of it and look and provide counsel and guidance? The one that just says, well, this might be going on, or you amp it up. You want to be the emotional roller coaster mom who's just like, I can't take anything to mom. She can't handle her own emotions right now. If I bring a problem to her, she's just going to amp me up and increase the stress. Or do you want to be the Proverbs 31 mom? The godly woman, clothed in strength and dignity, that speaks with wisdom into life, that your kids know as they age that they can come to you to gracefully hear wisdom from. And
sorry to interrupt you. I think it's safe to say that, at least for me, I am all these moms sometimes. But and no one's going to be the Proverbs 31 mom, because that perfect lady doesn't exist. This is sort of a holding up this perfect standard for godliness. But we want to think about what we're overall characterized by, right? Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, and I think that's...
I am all these moms.
And I think the call to us as parents, and as we talk through what we emphasize in this class, we're holding up the godly example, knowing we're going to fall short. And the challenges as parents, going back to that pressure piece, is the moments when you fail, when you're the mom or the dad that we listed off that you don't want to be. That we don't want that to result in the shame and guilt of a tailspin of, I can't do this, I'm failed at this, I don't know what to do. But instead a reminder that if our authority and our hope is placed in Christ and his grace that he has for us as parents when we mess up is the grace that is bestowed upon him, by him, to our kids and to us. And we pray that their hearts are in his hands. And like Heather said, like, we are striving towards these godly examples of parents. So, went kind of all over the place there. But the reason I started there with where we want to be is because it sets up the conversation about authority in the home, right? All those examples I gave you of parenting struggles and parents that we don't want to exemplify, and the things that we do deal with how we handle authority in the home, whether we use it, abuse it, or abandon it.
Yeah, so as a reminder, the overall structure each week that we're hoping to walk through is we'll start with a biblical principle around parenting. So that's a long time leading up to some practical information. We want to start there and then move into some practical, sort of non-convictional ways that this could play out as we draw on our parenting experience and share what that has looked like. So
yeah, our intent here is, we start together the first half, like these are the things as a body of believers convictionally believe. When we get into the practical, there's going to be some stuff that we just want to throw out examples, but we fully acknowledge you may say, I like that to some things and I don't like that to others. So
Yeah.
we're trying to make that divide.
yeah, there's freedom in Christ in the way that we can obey the Lord in these principles. So we're diving into authority this week. And we start with authority because this really is, if not one of the most important heart issues we're going to deal with our kids, because it's foundational to everything else. Everything else we're going to try to do hinges on our authority in their lives. And so I looked up the definition of authority in the dictionary. The Merriam-Webster definition is the power to influence or command thought, opinion, or behavior. I thought that was strong. It's more helpful for me to think about authority as being under authority. And so practically to me, authority is a submission of will, which, as you know, we experience every day in parenting. We must submit our will to the Lord as we ask our kids to submit their wills to ours. And so last week we opened up Deuteronomy 6. We examined this call to parents to lead our children to love the Lord with all their heart, with all their soul, with all their might and strength. But we see God's authority in humanity established way before the Exodus, right? We see God establish his authority in creation. So God has created Adam and Eve. He has put them in a particular place with particular boundaries, particular jobs to do, and ways to interact with him. And so we see that authority is established by our good and loving God, and so authority is a good, loving thing in our lives. Our culture does not think authority is good and loving. We hear a lot of pushback on this concept of authority. Kids want independence earlier. Nobody wants to be told what to do. We ran into a friend recently that was saying, I finally own my own business and nobody tells me what to do. And owning your own business is a great thing. That's not bad at all. But that was his first puff was, I don't have anybody telling me what to do. I'll work when I want and do what I want.
And I'll dive in and share one more story. Like I have delved into now supervising some Gen Z employees, and I'm starting to see some people that have grown up in households where there was no authority. And so it's like, hey, I think that one day you could have some of these phenomenal ideas that you have. We could put them into place. I think one day you could have some leadership in our organization. But today, I need you to finish the new employee paperwork and finish new employee orientation. There's never been you've got to do this by then now.
Yeah, so when you hear this concept of authoritative parenting, and I'm using some hot button parenting terms that can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people, but the truth is, God calls us to be authority figures as his ambassador in our kids' lives. And so we are called to be authoritative in our parenting, but our culture does not like that. We like to hear things like child-led parenting or permissive parenting. And again, acknowledging those mean lots of different things. But the truth is, we are born with a natural rejection of authority. Our sin nature will cause us and our kids to reject authority in our lives. We only need to take a glance at our toddlers even before our kids grow, even before our kids can talk, to see that this sinful notion of self-rule is going to cover everything they do. They're going to fight with us about what foods they want to eat, where they want to eat them, whether they want to throw them, what they want to wear, whether they want to share their toys with their siblings, when they want to go to bed, even, let's fight over what TV show we watch, whatever it is. But this rejection of authority is going to make us and our kids want our own way, resist giving in, and really it makes us the center of our own little world. And so we need to recognize that rejecting authority is sinful because it places ourselves at the center, and that is a space that only God can take up. This is something we have to address early on in the game. We must establish our authority in the home when our kids are teeny tiny. Like I said, even before they're talking. So there are some general principles we're going to think about around authority. First, we need to recognize that our authority is derived. This is a derived authority that's given to us by God. So we only act as authority figures in our kids' lives because God is first in authority over us, and he has granted that to us as stewards over our kids' lives. This is very convictional to me, we are the visible picture to our kids of God's authority. Even in prepping this lesson for this week, I wrote that sentence and read that sentence over and over. And there was a moment yesterday where I was having a disciplinary conversation with one of my kids, and I thought, how can I handle this differently if my person right now is the visible image of God's authority in their lives? It absolutely changed what I said and how I responded to what was happening in this kid's heart. So let's take a quick look at Genesis chapter 18. I'm at Genesis 18, verse 19. This is the Lord speaking of Abraham. He says, "For I have chosen him that he may command his children and his household after him to keep the way of the Lord by doing righteousness and justice, so that the Lord may bring to Abraham what he has promised him." So we see here even just a tiny picture of God bestowing the role of parent to Abraham to lead his children. And this is a leading not according to his agenda, but according to the agenda that God's going to give him. So we've got to remember, our authority is not optional. Exercising authority in our home is not optional. We are in sin and disobedient to the Lord if we do not establish authority over our kids. So because we are the visible image of God's authority to our kids, we need to be very clear in our theology, in the way that we talk about God, the way that we understand God and his character and what he wants for our lives. And so we're going to keep coming back probably every lesson to what we talked about last week, that our relationship with the Lord is primary. We must be spending time with the Lord and be walking in fellowship with the Lord if we even have a hope of doing this thing well.
And we're gonna get to this more in a second, but to that, that foundational piece is kind of a reminder to us that our authority only extends, if it is derived from the Lord, as parents, it is on us to make sure that we are pointing our kids to Christ and discipling them in love with that authority.
Yeah, and I'll say, it's very easy to get outside of that quickly. And that's our tendency, right? We have sinful tendencies in everything that we do, but if we are not careful, there have been times that I will respond to my kid poorly or harshly, and then I'll think, I've not really been in the Word this week. There is a direct correlation there. Number two, we need to remember that our authority should give good boundaries. These are boundaries that exist for our kids' good and for God's glory. So like I said, just like when God put Adam and Eve in the garden, he placed them in a particular place. So physical boundaries with places that they, things they could eat, things they couldn't eat, but they did, and things that they should and shouldn't do. So not just physical boundaries. And the same is true for us. It is our job to place good boundaries. That is a phrase that we use, that at least I use a lot in our home. When the kids say, like, why don't we do this? Why can't I do this? You know, you don't yet have the wisdom to make those choices. And so this is mom and dad placing good boundaries in your life for your protection and so that we can honor God. So let's take a look. I know we're jumping around into lots of different passages and acknowledging sometimes we lose the full context of where we're going in these scripture passages because we are popping around. That's kind of that's a con of a topical study, but we're going to pop into Ephesians 6 for just a second. So this is Paul. He's been giving instructions to different groups of people on living godly lives. In Ephesians 6, this is verses 1 through 4. He says, "Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother. This is the first commandment with a promise that it may go well with you and that you may live long in the land. Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord." I love this passage because it connects a lot of things. And even as we were talking about these lessons, there's so much overlap. You know, this week we're talking about authority. We'll move into obedience and discipline, I think, next. And it's hard not to get into the following week's lessons because all these things are intertwined. But I love that after saying, kids, obey your parents, because there's blessing associated with that, he says, hey, dads, be careful. Like, don't anger your children, but bring them up in the discipline and the instruction of the Lord. And that's authority in their lives. Lastly, we remember that our authority must always, as much as it's possible, our authority must be consistent. I read somewhere once that our kids cannot serve as the emotional meteorologists of our home. And so that speaks to me a lot because I struggle with inconsistency sometimes in my reactions. So our kids should not have to guess how we're going to respond to a situation. They should know our character, and they should know their expectations. So when that big spill happens, are they going to be surprised by the fact that we laugh it off because they expect us to blow up? Or are they going to be surprised that we blow up because yesterday we laughed it off? Do we address a heart issue with them today, and then we're too lazy to worry about it tomorrow? So because God is steadfast and consistent with his justice, we must also be. In thinking through this, I was thinking about words that I wanted to describe the consistency in my parenting. And I thought, our authority should be forgiving. It should be protective, should be kind and wise, that our authority should be self-controlled and patient. These were helpful words for me. We trust the Lord in our parenting, and God is going to do what he wants with our kids. We do our best to be faithful, and then we entrust their lives to him. But there are ways that we can honestly hinder the work of the Holy Spirit in their hearts. And so we have to be careful that we don't misuse our authority.
Absolutely. And, I think looking at the positive ways and thinking about the positive authority is absolutely the place to start. And I would also add that sometimes you can learn a lot about these things by thinking about what godly authority is not. Mm-hmm. And in a lot of ways, I think one of the reasons culturally that people struggle with authoritative parenting and discussing authority in parenting are two misunderstandings. Like the first is just not understanding where that authority comes from and why it matters. And two is because they've not seen it done well and they don't understand what it should look like. So let's talk for a few minutes about kind of the practicality of this and how it's played out in our home. And I would just want to start by saying, just here's some things authority is not, right? Like, so when we say authority and demonstrating and using authority in your home, that doesn't mean screaming, yelling, and domineering and being the dominant, loudest one. That's not what we mean when we say the authority in the home. This is not how we're called to act or live as parents. Now, I'm not saying there is never a time or place to raise your voice, but I'm saying the day-to-day thing, this should be based on authority, should be part of a conversation, a relationship, a love between you and your kids, but also an acknowledgement that while they're in your house, you are the final decision maker. So it doesn't always mean like they have to do immediately what you say with never a single question and no opportunity for discussion. There's a balance to all this, right? Like there's some time for conversation, but also acknowledging with your kids, there's a time where there is no more conversation. This is what I've said, and this is what is happening. This is very much age appropriate as they grow. We are working towards teaching them to make good decisions on their own, but we're going to model how to make good decisions for them when they're young, and some things we're just going to say, this is what we're doing. If you want to ask questions about it, you can ask questions about it in the act of obeying or after you've done what I asked.
Yeah, do the thing, and then you can ask questions.
I know this feels a little uncomfortable sometimes, but it's like, our house is not a democracy. You don't get a say in every single decision that's made. And again, I joked about the Gen Z example, but you kind of see this play out. Some adults, I'm seeing it in the workplace where they feel entitled to have a say in everything that's said. And, workplace is very different than the home, but at the same time, we don't want our kids to grow up feeling like they have the right to have their opinion heard in every single situation that there is. Our commands, I like driving in southeast Kentucky. I like being out in the woods and the mountains everywhere. I like driving the hairy little roads. And when you do that and you're on the curvy mountain road, on one side of you have a sheer rock face, and on the other you have a straight drop off. And you got to stay on the road. And so as we talk through so many of these issues, I'm going to be talking about the mountainside face to not run into on this side and the cliff not to fall off on this side, right? So this is kind of how it is with being the authority in your home. On one hand, there's going to be some times where the expectation is set for your kids that this is what I've asked you to do. I need you to do it without protest. And on other times, you're going to set some pieces here of, okay, if you want to talk about the why of this, here is the when, and here is the how to do this. For us, we really choose to model those in conversation. So, as an example, all right, this morning, we are in the middle of snow coming down everywhere. We need to get everybody out in the car immediately so we can make it up our crazy steep hill. If we sit around longer, we're going to get snowed in. So there's a moment when there's 5 of us to get in the car. I say, I don't care where you are in the get ready process, put your shoes on, tie your shoes, get in the car. Well, why? I'm not going to answer that question right now. Right now, I need you to get your shoes on and get in the car. We will discuss the why when we get in the car. And there's a piece in authority at times when you have to recognize when an argument starts. You get to decide as the parent whether you're going to have the argument or not, right?
Or whether it needs to be ended then.
This is not an argument now. Now, what happened in this case is we chose to, when we got in the car, hey, let's talk through the situation here. We are teaching Sunday school this morning. We need to make sure that we make it there. Let's talk about what happened. We ask you to get ready in urgency, and this is why. And I'll also add that in this instance, we've been having some challenges with this the past few outings, but in this instance, they killed it. There was very little question. And so for us, afterwards, it was like, you all did awesome. This was a panicked morning. Mom and Dad were struggling with being panicked.
It was hectic.
I was the one driving. No, it was a speedy morning. You all killed it. You were ready to go. I appreciate it. I love it. We can get more done as a family we can have a much happier morning if, like, there are times when you don't protest, you just do what's asked, and trust that mom and dad are going to do it for your good, and we're going to explain it to you when you need to know, if you need to know. And in that piece, there's that reminder that our authority is not here to break relationship with our kids, right? Like, we're going to talk more about this as the weeks go on, but this authority is in context of a day-to-day relationship. The exercising of authority isn't the sole portion of your relationship. It's not just constantly giving instruction. There's a time and a place for the listening, but there's also a time and a place to say, this is what needs to get done immediately. And look, this is one of the practical pieces, just to hang in here for a second. The authority piece is a challenge. And at every age and life stage, your kids are going to go through a phase of testing your authority over them and in the household. That looks different at every stage. But I would encourage you, when you go through these testing periods, think back about what your goal is and don't become lazy. Go back to the errors that we can fall into. You can use it, you can misuse it, you can abuse it, or you can abandon that derived authority. So I think about the toddler years because it's easiest to think about these, but when they're little, they're gonna test your authority in a lot of ways. One is just flat out, some of them may just flat out ignore you, like, I'm not gonna listen to what mom and dad say. You may have one that's a meltdown fit thrower, like if you tell them to do something, like their go-to is a meltdown fit. So as you dive into that, well, let me start with an example because I think that'll be easier. I'll say, I recall one. We went through bouts in that early phase with each kid. Some of it lasted months, some of it lasted weeks, but where they definitively, you could tell, maybe they didn't articulate it in their mind, but they were directly questioning our authority. And
the heels were digging in.
One of them I remember is we told a kid to put probably about 3 years old, to put away a train set. And it was just like, it was a day we were just all around at the house, and this one wasn't a fit thrower. This one was just like a look you dead in the eye and go,
I'm not doing that.
ain't gonna do it. So I said, all right, I gotta tell you, you're gonna do this. Nope, not gonna do it. So at this point, you've all gone through this, right? Just a reminder to us as parents, like in my thought process in my head, like, I have authority over you. I am bigger than you. I am more patient than you. And you're going to do this. And over the next couple hours, we went through several bouts of some discipline, some him walking away, picking him up, setting him back down in front of the train set, and saying patiently, like, you're going to do this. We did well. There was not screaming or yelling on our part. It was just, I'm going to sit here with you. You're going to do this. And that progressed to a point where I think we even ate a meal. Like the rest of the family ate a meal at the table.
Within sight while this child sat next to the messy train set.
And that was a defining moment of like the battle of wills. And it's like, and again, this one, people get real nervous when you say it, but there is a breaking of will with your kids, of like recognizing that you are in authority in the home, and it's good.
Yeah, that's submission.
It's good for the things that we talked about here to talk through, like, hey, my authority is rooted in what God has called me to do as a parent. Like, have that conversation with your kid. Don't just say, do it because I said so. Like, do this. This is the authority granted in me to be the authority in our home. I've told you to do this. I'm going to do it. Yeah, a train set can seem super insignificant. You're like, pick it up and move on, and your day is gone.
Yeah, that wasn't the important issue.
But don't miss the point. Don't miss the hard issue, one. And two, for us in our house, we set out a goal and an expectation as we had these authority conversations with our kid that our ask was obey without challenge, without excuse, and without delay. And that's not just us. I know that's one repeated by parents before us that we've heard, and also others since. And we taught them in their words, obey all the way the right way, and with a happy heart. And so, again, it's getting super practical about this for us. We were never counting people. We were never a tick, tick, boom people. Like,
What do you
go
mean
and-
by counting?
we'll get there.
Okay.
Never like, wait and then blow up. And what I mean by that is thinking again about the future. Like if you're like, I'm going to give you to the count of 5 to do what I said. Like, all right, what are you teaching if you're counting? And just, to think about this for you. Well, you're kind of teaching, in my mind, I think what you're telling them is, Mom's not serious till she gets to 5, probably more like 6 or 7, right? Like that, is that the message you're intending to send if you're like, I don't do what Mom and Dad say till they're done counting? The same with like yelling. Like we recognized early on that if we say, hey, I need you to go do this, or I need you to stop do this, and we resort into patterns of repeating it until we yell, go do this. Like what have you communicated? You've communicated, well, Dad's not serious till he yells.
I don't have to do it
Like,
until
I don't
someone
have to
blows
do
up.
it till, it's yell. So like, think about the standard that you want to set in your house of what that expectation is and relying on your authority. And again, go back to, authority doesn't mean like yelling, domineering to get what you want. I heard somebody say, it's not demands either. Like kidnappers and bank robbers use demands. Like, no. Like the point here is to guide towards understanding authority, and your kids having respect for what you say. So again, the other piece of this, the other struggle, the other ditch to fall into is when we're tired and we're worn out and we're under pressure, abandoning authority. So for me as a dad, I knew one thing, tried to get in the habit of if I instruct my kids to do something, I need to, like Heather put out earlier, it needs to be clear and it needs to be consistent, and I need to be ready to back it up. Mm-hmm. Like I knew that if I asked or told one of my kids to do something, that if I set the expectation, well, I'm too tired to deal with this, I'm going to sit on the couch and say, quit doing that, or go in the other room and do it where I can't see you and it doesn't bother me, and I don't get up and address it if they don't do it. Again, I've established a pattern. Like, okay, Dad's watching the ball game, I can do what I want because he's so fixated on that, he's just going to shoo me out of the way. No, like I want the expectation of, hey, if Dad tells me to do something, like I can do it out of willing submission, or I'm going to deal with the consequences of not doing it, and Dad will address it.
Yeah, every one of these interactions answers our kids' questions about whether they are in charge of their own life and decisions. That sounds...
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, just again, I draw you back to think about that tone that you set for your house. And authority doesn't have to be screaming, yelling, domineering, but it can also mean if Dad tells you to do something, you're going to do it, or he's going to get up and address it. And dads especially, this authority piece, you are the head of your household. Like that is your responsibility. And that, how you use your authority impacts how your wife does, how mom is viewed in the home. And I say that there's, our goal for our home is no like yelling, or that's not our baseline of where we want to be. But I will tell you, there are times when, yes, I raise my voice. And one in particular, as the older as the kids have gotten, is if they question the authority of their mom. Like that is one, like you are gonna, like there's gonna be a piece from Dad fast and hard if you question the authority of your mom. The punch motion, not good. Thanks for calling me out.
Yep.
No, I'm taking an assessment here. No, but the point is of like, yeah, dads, you said this a lot, and if you choose to be lazy with your authority and leave it up to mom to handle everything, like you're gonna see the problems of that, both in your kids, and it's gonna leave mom out there hanging a lot to pick that piece up.
When the kids say, well, I don't have to do that until Dad says. Yeah.
All right. A few other, I know we've hung here for a while, but a few other cautions on authority. One in particular, I'd say a lot of A lot of us are, either in the millennial or just straddling the millennial generation, but a real challenge I think that we see with the authority piece is unwittingly giving our authority away. It's funny. It's funny parenting now. Outside of like giving our kids boats and jets, the reality is pretty much most of us listening to this lesson can give our kids just about everything they want and more. It's like we have the wealth and the capacity to spoil our kids rotten. And I think even in the little ways, it's really tempting to do that and not realize it. And one of those ways, again, and it feels hard to say, but is to give your kids choices everywhere. To give them the opportunity to make decisions over everything. What do you want for breakfast this morning? What can I make you for breakfast? Okay, what do you want to wear? I can lay these things out for you. What do you want to do today? We can do this or that or this. Mm-hmm. And on one hand, I'm not saying you never do that. You never lay out options for your kids, but I also encourage us all to think about who is the primary decision maker in our house. And think of the developmental stage of your kids and the challenges that come with giving away all the decisions and what you teach them. And I'll say this one is one from personal experience for us. Like we realized with one that we were doting over them a lot. We were enjoying them, but also we were laying out all the options. Like, hey, what do you want to do here? And it, that came out. That the little boss attitude started to come out. And we started to see this kid views themselves as the center of attention in everything. They're upset when they don't get the choice that they want. And now, and sometimes we're noticing we could lay out 5 options, and every single one of the 5 options is not good.
Well, and I think it comes back to those good boundaries that we give our kids. I mean, I think we kind of let the boundaries down when we give them decision fatigue. Like they are not developmentally able to handle that kind of decision making. And so even though they might not like us saying, here is your outfit or whatever it is for today, honestly, there's comfort and security to our kids in us making decisions for them that we should be making for them.
Back with more work analogies, but I remember one time in particular, I had one of the more frustrating supervisors. And I was, managing a section of an agency, and we were I was crunching budget numbers and looking at our trajectory, and I'm like, okay, I've got a year and a half until I'm out of money to pay for these staff. I can't cut anywhere else. It's clear. So I go to the supervisor, and he's like, thanks. I believe in you. You got this. You can handle it. You can work through anything. I know you can. And you're like, no, see, this piece is not mine. I can't fix that. Only you can fix that. And he's like, you got it, man. I love you. I love your enthusiasm. I appreciate you. Knock it out. And it was the worst feeling ever because you're like, no, this is not something I can fix on my own. I'm just hanging out here, and in an attempt to be motivating and freeing, he really was abandoning his responsibility and his authority required for his position. And it sounds weird to nitpick little decisions like this in the house, but then you think about what that can feel like, right? Your kids do look to you as the sense of authority. They want you to make the good decisions for them. And they don't know how to express that. They're not going to express that. So it's up to us to think about how to use that authority well. And again, back and forth, either side of the ditch. The ditch to not fall in is to give them every decision to make. You will see the frustration in it. I go back to that example of you give 5 choices and they're all wrong. You'll feel it.
It's maddening.
Yes, it's maddening. And it sounds silly, but it's absolutely huge. And you can see it in the middle school and high school years. We're having a struggle with it. Culturally, where you look at households and the kids dictate everything in the house. They dictate what activities everybody does, what sports they want to play in, what the entire family does. They're the center of all attention. And now it's even got so ridiculous We're talking about kids should have authority in their gender choices. Like you can see our kids are just not developed to the point to make all these little decisions at these ages. It's a piece we need to maintain our authority in. And I'll say, kind of last on that, when you think about the adulthood piece, it's really hard to grow up to be a Christ-centered adult when you grew up being the center of attention and the center of authority. And that plays out in a major way in adulthood when you see, a newly married wife who's mad because now she's a mom and she's got to take care of kids and she doesn't get enough time for her and her husband doesn't constantly dote on her the way she wants. And that's a wild example, but it does play out. Like, it's just hard to make that transition. So I think that begs the question of, well, how do your kids learn to make a good decision if you make them all for you? I go back to that initial graph where we talked about that your authority starts to change the older they get. And they learn when they're little by you making good decisions for them. Like, hey, this is why we're having a meat and a vegetable for lunch and we're not eating ice cream. Like, this is the reason why. We do that so you have a healthy body, so that you are not on a sugar high and get in more trouble for your behavior after lunch. Like, they learn those good decisions by us making them for them. And then as they get older, I think it's up to us as parents to give them some healthy bounds to make decisions, to have more authority over decisions. So again, getting practical for how we've started that in little ways, even 10 and 12-year-olds, is we're going to give them space. I mean, I'm an outdoor person, so I view it as super beneficial for our kids to get time outdoors, because for me, I view that as an extra safe space for them to widen their authority boundaries and not get in as much trouble. If they want to go crazy out in the woods, they can go crazy and run and climb trees in the woods. In other ways, it's been for us like, okay, here's $6. I need you to go in this grocery store and I need you to get this and check out and come out. Like, and starting that at whatever age you want. For us, I think we started it at like 9, 10. Single entrance exit stores. Yeah. But yeah, like, here you go do this on your own. I want to see you do it. And then we can talk through as examples with them, like, hey, when I can trust you in these little things, when you make good decisions here, the natural is I hope you grow in your trust for me as I grow in my trust for you, and I'm going to give you more decision space. If you make a mistake, make a poor decision, we're going to pull some of that back a little bit. Right? So think about how you model for them good decisions and then how you give them more and more space. And we'll talk about this more, but the idea of natural consequences of like, hey, if you do this well, then you get this next opportunity. For me and our kids, it's often like crazy adventures. Like, hey, if I trust that you can obey immediately without question, we're going to do some awesome stuff. Like, we've taken our kids, we did a big hiking trip, this fall, and we told our kids, like, this is a dangerous place to go. Like, there is a 1,000-foot drop 2 feet away. I need to be able to trust that you will listen to me fully without question, without delay. And if you can do that, we're going to do awesome stuff. And we got to. So I don't want this to all seem like a negative struggle, but encourage in the conversation and in the relational piece with your kids of like, hey, let's grow in this together. And as they question that authority, talk through what it looks like for their own authority to grow and how to make that happen within safe boundaries.
Yeah, so it's important that because our authority is granted by the Lord, that we point our kids to Scripture so that they don't think we are operating under some arbitrary set of rules. And so it's important that we teach the Bible to our kids so that we are equipping them to live under God's authority as they grow, and hopefully as they grow as a disciple of Christ. So I don't have as much time as I'd like to spend here, so this is going to be a very fast flyover. We all know, we've seen kids that have grown up in a gospel-centered family and have gone off the rails as adults. We've also seen kids who grew up in a non-believing, dysfunctional, messed up family, and by God's grace have grown up to be godly men and women there is no perfect formula for this, but we do have responsibility as believers to disciple our kids. And I know I've used this word discipleship a lot, and when I use that, I'm talking about the spiritual formation of our kids, helping them form their theology, their thinking and words about God, and their understanding of the Lord. So what does it look like then for scriptural authority to be obvious to our kids in our homes? We are going to do this in one of two ways. We can do this in programmed, like pre-planned measures, and then we can do this in organic, kind of on-the-fly ways. And so thinking through programmed opportunities here, a lot of us will refer to this as in terms like family worship or family discipleship time or family Bible study time, family quiet time. It's never quiet. I don't know why it's ever called that. And so this is kind of where we're missing our crowd, because we did want to kind of chat back and forth and share good ideas of what we do. But we'll kind of let you know what that has looked like for us. So the questions people always have around this are, what even does this look like? What is family worship? What do we do? When do we do it? And like, what do other people do? I referenced last week the practical parenting class that Kevin and Will taught last year. And Kevin walked through great examples of this in one session. He talked through resources and different ways this might look. And that is, I highly recommend that. Go back and look at that. For us, this, when I say family discipleship time, this is actual teaching the Bible to our kids. There are tons of great book resources. No one loves books for kids more than me. But Chris taught us this thing that Spurgeon said, and he said, visit many good books, but live in the Bible. And I think about that a lot in my parenting, that I want them to visit all the good booklands, but I want them to love God's word. And so we can read a lot of good books about the Bible that aren't the Bible, but it's our job to teach the Bible to our kids. So in some way, we need to come together as a family and actually read the Bible with our kids. They can understand it more than we think they can. This can be at bedtime, if that's when your family gets a little bit of time together. You might think about just leveraging time that your family is already together. Do you eat dinner at the table together every night? Well, you probably pray together for your meal. Maybe take a minute and read, a chapter of the book of John, or whatever it is. Go through a book together, a book of the Bible, not another book. You can do that too, but Bible first. Do you all get time together in the car? We like to leverage car rides. Car rides are big for us. That's where we'll pray together a lot. That's where we hear about each other's needs. And I said this last week, that sometimes you can have better conversations when you're not face to face with your kids. Sometimes shoulder to shoulder conversations are more fruitful. What else? In the car, at the table, at bedtime, whenever works. I like to have a captive audience. So I like for food to be involved when we study the Bible with our kids. If they're already eating, they're already sitting there, and I can leverage that time with them. Okay.
I'm a morning person. So I discovered reading the Bible and having a few moments with kids in the evening. It's like the focus was on getting to bed, and they're amped, and then I'm amped. That time did not work well for us. So, but I found that, for ours, I love getting up in the morning early. They're a little slow moving. They're, not in wild mode yet, but.
Which is to your advantage sometimes.
It is to, I've enjoyed it. And I also, would plug, my hope is that, doing that early is also modeling for them something that's realistic for the rest of their life. That getting up early and studying the Word is something they could do. To Heather's point, I've joked about this before. She said there's programmed and then there's organic opportunities. And I joked my hobby is having hobbies. I'm always doing something, 10 million things. One of the things that I've tried to work on and continue to improve on is being intentional with doing things with my kids. If we're doing something shoulder to shoulder and we're working on something, I'm using that time for some gospel conversations. I love to fish. That's a great way to do it. So one of my things is now I used to fish alone all the time. I rarely do anymore. I try to use that opportunity to go out with other men, and it's relationship time, hanging out. And I try to take my kids, and when I do that, I try to make sure that we're having biblical conversations. And I go back to where we started in Deuteronomy 6, verse 7, talking about the words that the Lord commands them. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise.
When you sit on your boat.
And when you sit on your boat. But just, don't fall pressure to overthinking, spending time in the Word together with your kids. If you don't know what to do, just find a time, pop open the New Testament, and just start reading and read half a chapter and talk through it. Like, just start there. It doesn't have to be crazy. You'll never catch me singing with a guitar in our family worship time. Like, it's not what I'm going to be able to pull off. So don't get overwhelmed with it when you hear people say that. And then the other thing, make talking about the Lord part of your day-to-day, what you do all the time when you're with them. And again, all the way back to that analogy of archery. You've got a lot of pressure, a lot of things building on you, but don't forget to aim. Let's wrap up in prayer this morning. Lord, I thank you for the opportunity that you've given us to steward little hearts and little minds. And I ask, Lord, for grace as we do that as parents, as we know that we're not going to do it perfectly, but just have grace on us for our faults and mistakes. And Lord, just we ask and pray for the kids of everyone that's listening to this morning, that you would just win over their hearts and that they would turn to you. Thank you so much for all that you do and how much you love and care for us. It's in your name that we pray. Amen.
Amen.